The avoidant doesn't beg for love easily. They don't chase after just anyone. For most people, their silence remains unbroken, their pride intact. But for the one they truly love, the one who has touched the parts of them they never show the world, the rules change. When you say no to the avoidant, it's not just a rejection, it's a crack in the quiet structure they've built to survive. They tell themselves it doesn't matter, that your absence is just another empty space. But deep down, something else begins, a subtle shift in the story they've been living for years. You weren't just another chapter to them, you were the part they never wanted to admit existed. Your presence was a silent anchor, one they only recognized when it was gone. For everyone else, they remain the same, distant, controlled, unaffected. But with you they can't hide the unraveling. The first crack appears the moment they realize your no isn't temporary, it's not a test, it's not a bluff. And then a sequence of quiet dynamics begins, each one pulling them closer to the truth they've always run from. That losing you isn't just losing love, it's losing the only place where they were ever truly seen. Now let's look at the 5 dynamics that begin inside an avoidant from the moment you say no to them. If any part of this feels connected to your own life, please leave a comment, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe for more topics like this. Dynamic 1. The calm strike. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "Silence is worse. All truths that are kept silent become poisonous." That truth also hides within your no. For the avoidant, your no is not an ordinary word. It is a quiet yet deep strike, one that makes no noise but cuts all the way inside. That moment when you draw your boundaries in a calm tone creates an unexpected empty space on their mental map. This space doesn't shake them instantly, but it sends a silent and constant tremor through the entire story they've been living. A story in which they have always seen themselves as powerful, independent, and free from the need for anyone else. Your no is the first blow to that narrative. For the avoidant, it's a surprise when someone willingly steps out of their circle. They often decide in life that they will be the one to leave, while the other person will always be the one holding on. But when your steps move backward, when you quietly take your presence away without creating a scene, it becomes an anomaly in their mental calculations. They don't label it immediately as an ego issue, they call it a personal choice, or file it away as a minor disagreement. Yet from that very moment, a conversation begins between their conscious and subconscious. At first it's faint, but over time it becomes clearer. They start thinking, why did this happen? I didn't do anything that would make them completely turn away. But that question is itself a thread, and as they pull on it, the entire fabric of their mental world begins to tighten and strain. The calm strike is dangerous precisely because it doesn't provoke an aggressive reaction, it's a delayed impact earthquake. Your calmness, your refusal to over-explain, and your signal that you will no longer engage in any emotional negotiation. These combine to create the first jolt that begins a major internal shift. On the outside, they remain the same face, the same manner, the same routine. But inside, a subtle tremor has already begun. And this tremor is not a passing feeling, it's the early sign of an unfolding process that deepens over time. This invisible shift lays the foundation for the next dynamics, gradually dismantling the protective structure they've built around themselves. Eventually, it leads them to a point where begging is no longer just an act, it becomes an acknowledgement of their internal collapse, a quiet admission that the no they once brushed off was actually the beginning of their unraveling. Dynamic 2. Cracks in the story. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." And this is the moment when the avoidant is forced to re-examine the meaning of their perceived freedom. After the calm strike, the quiet tremor that began slowly takes on a new shape, the shape of the first crack. In the story the avoidant has been writing in their mind for years, an empty space begins to appear for the first time. This story was about themselves, a narrative in which they were always in control, where others leaving or staying depended entirely on their decision. But your rejection has drawn lines across that page of their story, lines they cannot erase. They still think in their mind that they are completely free, yet in reality, they have become prisoners of their own narrative. This crack doesn't form through noise or dramatic collapse. It's born in a silent moment, when they sit alone and recall an old scene where your presence silenced a fear deep within them. At the time they didn't give it importance, perhaps even saw it as pressure. But now that same moment has become a reference point against which the current silence and loneliness feel heavier. Inside them, a subtle comparison begins between the comfort of the past they never acknowledged and the empty space of the present that nothing else seems to fill. The cracks in the story are dangerous because they directly challenge their self-image. When they try to convince themselves they are independent, these fractures whisper from the subconscious, "If you're truly whole, why does this emptiness still exist?" To the outside world, they can still declare their independence, telling others that everything is under control. But inside, an inner dialogue is growing louder, a dialogue that with each passing day pushes them closer to questions they have always avoided. These cracks are not merely emotional, they are cognitive, shaking the very foundation of their beliefs, their decisions and their behavior. And once that foundation is shaken, it is only a matter of time before the rest of the structure follows. This is the point where the avoidant begins to think, perhaps for the first time, that the story in which they were the hero may in fact have been a fiction, and your role in that story was far more important than they were willing to admit. This realization, slow but relentless, begins to push them toward the next dynamic, where your absence becomes more than just space. It becomes a constant silent shadow that walks beside them, reminding them that their control was never as complete as they believed. Dynamic 3. The ghost of your presence. Søren Kierkegaard once said, "The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have." And this is exactly the state the avoidant begins to endure when the first crack in their story has already formed. A new stage quietly emerges, the moment when your absence becomes an invisible pressure, one that begins to touch every second of their existence. They convince themselves it's simply the effect of habit. But it's not habit, it's your imprint, now lingering in their daily life like a shadow that refuses to fade. This shadow makes no sound, yet it is silently present in every scene, whether it's the desk at work or the stillness of an empty room. The avoidant starts remembering moments with you where they felt safer, calmer, more anchored. But now those same moments have transformed into memories of a future they will never get to have again. The ghost of your presence becomes unbearable because it is felt in every place where you are no longer physically present. A faint scent, the soft hum of a familiar song, the quiet hour in the evening when the two of you used to talk, all of these turn into emotional triggers, and there's no real way to avoid them. The more they try to erase these memories, the more they return in unexpected forms. The power of this ghost lies in the fact that it forces them to see you as more than just a person. You were an emotional space, a place where their fears temporarily quieted, where their inner storms found a momentary shelter. Now that this place is gone, there is nowhere else in the world that can replicate that sense of safety. Outwardly they try to keep themselves busy, more meetings, more social gatherings, more distractions, but none of it succeeds in dissolving the invisible pressure. This pressure never attacks directly, instead it slowly seeps into their thought process. When they meet someone new, they unconsciously begin comparing them to you, and more often than not, the comparison makes the new connection feel hollow. This ghost is a persistent reminder that your presence was not just about physical companionship, it carried an unspoken ability to organize their internal chaos. Now not only is that stabilizing force absent, but its absence has carved a permanent hollow inside them. Over time, this hollow turns into pressure, and that pressure eventually begins pushing them toward the next dynamic, where your absence is no longer the only weight they feel. Alongside it grows another fear, the possibility that someone else has now stepped into your world, filling the very place they once took for granted. And that thought is not just unsettling, it's the beginning of a quiet panic that will drive their next emotional shift. Dynamic 4. The shadow of someone else. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "Jealousy in love is a sentiment which is born in mistrust, and which in turn creates distrust." And this is exactly the mistrust that begins to spread within the avoidant at this stage. When someone's absence has already become a shadow, the next fear naturally arises, the fear that the empty space they once occupied may now have been filled by someone else. This thought doesn't creep in slowly, it strikes suddenly with full force. A single picture, a casual social media post, or an offhand comment from a mutual friend is enough to paint a vivid new scene in their mind, a scene in which someone else stands close to you. They might try to convince themselves that their place in your life is still secure, but each passing day, the fear inside them weakens that certainty. The shadow of someone else is dangerous because it's not just about jealousy or possessiveness. It feels like an existential threat, a danger that could bring down their entire narrative. This was the narrative in which they believed that if they ever chose to return, you would still be that same soft center, ready to accept them again. But the presence of another person in their imagination shatters that belief. From this point they begin searching for clues in every interaction, a subtle change in your tone, the hours you are online, or a certain light in your face that they once believed only they could bring. These small observations, conscious or unconscious, lead them to a chilling conclusion: they may no longer be the only one who sees you in that way. This realization creates a strange blend of emotions, longing, fear, and a hidden urgency. They no longer want to risk wasting time, yet they are still afraid of exposing their vulnerability. That's why this fear often appears in subtle actions, suddenly commenting on an old memory, sending a seemingly meaningless message, or casually asking a mutual friend about you. Each of these gestures serves one purpose: to find out whether their place in your world still exists. The shadow of someone else deepens the avoidance awareness that their position in your life is no longer guaranteed. This insecurity gnaws at them, turning their confidence into restlessness. They start to see time as their enemy, as if every passing day might be the day someone else completely takes their spot. And it is precisely this fear, the thought of being permanently replaced, that pushes them toward the final dynamic. In that last stage, their inner defenses begin to collapse, and begging stops being a conscious choice. It becomes something far more powerful, a psychological compulsion driven by the realization that losing you might mean losing the only place they ever truly felt seen. Dynamic 5. The unravel. René Descartes once said, "The greatest minds are capable of the greatest vices, as well as of the greatest virtues." In much the same way, the same sharp mind that once helped the avoidant protect themselves now begins to dismantle its own defenses. When fear, longing, and inner conflict push past a certain threshold, the avoidant reaches a point that can no longer be hidden, the moment when their inner walls begin to crumble. This breakdown doesn't come with loud drama. It happens in silence, like the slow settling of a building's foundation that has been eroding for years. On the outside they still wear the mask of strength, but inside, the constant weight of emptiness has drained their resilience. The unravel begins the moment they are forced to admit that your absence has created a void that neither new relationships nor endless distractions can fill. That admission shakes them deeply, because it's the very thing they've spent years avoiding, acknowledging their emotional dependency. At this stage, begging is no longer a strategy or a choice. It becomes an involuntary reaction, a psychological compulsion. They try reaching out in various ways: a casual message asking how you've been, a reaction to an old memory, or a string of disjointed words sent purely to capture your attention. Behind every gesture is the same unspoken question: am I still important to you? The unravel is intense because they've now lost control of their narrative. The story in which they always cast themselves as the one who leaves has been flipped upside down. Now they are the one waiting for the door to open again. This role reversal is disorienting, forcing them to confront parts of themselves they've long denied. The shift also comes with an acute awareness that time is no longer on their side. Every day that passes feels like another step away from the possibility of reconciliation, which only deepens their urgency. But their attempts to close the gap aren't always grand or obvious. Sometimes, the begging is hidden in quiet acts, silently watching every update you post, coming online the moment you do, or lingering in shared spaces, hoping for a chance encounter. Whether expressed openly or disguised in subtler forms, the truth is the same: reaching this point represents a complete collapse of their emotional structure. The unravel strips away the facade entirely, leaving nothing but the raw, unguarded sense of lack, the same emptiness that once drew them to you in the first place. And now, that very emptiness pulls them back toward you again, no longer out of control or avoidance, but because their defenses have finally given way to the truth they've been running from. You were never just another person in their story, you were the part of it they could never replace. And so, the journey comes to an end, from the calm strike to the final unravel. This is not a path the avoidant walks by choice, but one the echo of your no leads them down. Along the way, they watch the narrative they built for themselves begin to fracture, feel their own memories turn into a weight, grow fearful of the shadow of someone else, and finally witness their inner walls collapse. But one truth must always be remembered: an avoidant doesn't beg for everyone. They take that step only for the one who touched the silent emptiness inside them, who recognized their pain without needing words. For everyone else, they keep showing that same silent, strong face. Your no was never just a rejection, it was a psychological shift that awakened questions they had been suppressing for years. And when those questions grow so loud, they can no longer be ignored. Begging stops being an option and becomes a compulsion. Maybe they will change, maybe they won't. But one thing is certain: they can never be the same person they were before you left. Because you didn't just change the story of their life, you shattered the image they had been seeing of themselves for years.